who is Vintec, the brand? What is it all about? Where do they come from? What do they do? And how did they start?
So, interesting story. Vintec started in a couple of guys that I think are French, moved to Singapore back in the 70s or the 80s. And they both were wine lovers and wine collectors. And as you know, Singapore is almost on the equator, and it's one of the most difficult places to maintain a wine collection. Not just wine, but I mean, like you're talking like really expensive bottles of wine. And so they started going through all these different refrigeration solutions that were available at the time. One of them moved down to Australia. It was these partners, and then they both were sort of going back and forth from Singapore to Australia. And one guy I think he bought a company down there that made something, and then they repurposed everything. And they became like the leading company in Australia, Vintec. It's been there for over 20 years. And they were also a big hit in Singapore because there's a lot of wealthy people there, a lot of collectors, and it was one of those natural fits that a lot of trade was going back and forth between Australia and Singapore. The way Electrolux got involved was there came a time when Electrolux, who's based in Stockholm, Sweden, was planning on buying GE in America. This goes back, you can look this up in the Wall Street Journal, it's all there, it's very interesting. So Electrolux was going to purchase GE, so they started stockpiling cash. And suddenly, a couple of years went by, and they had all these billions of dollars sort of stockpiled to buy GE. And the U.S. federal, Supreme Court came in and said, "There's no way a foreign country is going to buy GE. Okay, it's just not going to happen." So they put a kibosh on the whole deal. Well, what happened is now Electrolux is sitting in their office, and they're going, "What do? We got $4 billion that we stashed over here to buy GE with." And now we can't buy GE, but we have all this money, we have to do something with it. So they went on this sort of global expedition to start acquiring small appliance companies. They bought sous vide. I don't know if you've heard of sous vide. It heats up and cooks meat and all these. They bought all these different appliance companies. And so one of the guys that was out on the road looking for the right companies to acquire happened to be in Australia. He's a French guy that happened to love wine, fell in love with this company and the whole idea, and convinced Electrolux to acquire it. So that's what they did, and that's how I got involved, because Electrolux, as I said, knew nothing about the wine world, and they needed somebody with, I suppose, some credibility and some knowledge about it to be able to speak fluently to the people that really matter the most, which is the end users.
Take us back to when you first joined Vintec. What was happening in the wine storage market at that time? And what made you say, hey, this is the company I want to represent?
Interesting question, because honestly at the time I didn't really know much about the wine storage industry or the wine storage space. My background had been in more of the retail and doing wine events and things like that. But as I learned more about it, it was very interesting, and I realized there is definitely a market for it. I mean, there's a lot of collectors out there that have pretty good sized collections, but what they like to do is to have part of their collection at home so they can not only show it off, but it's convenient for them to take. And I didn't realize it until I got involved with Vintec that there is sort of a high-end market, I suppose, for this type of an appliance, and they consider it sort of a home appliance, but it's way more than a wine refrigerator. They call them wine storage systems.
So paint us a picture of what your territory looked like on day one. You know, how many dealers did you have? What kind of accounts? And give an honest take on how much did those dealers actually know about the refrigerator?
Well, that's interesting, because nobody knew anything about the Vintec refrigerator. Electrolux was the parent company. That's who I was actually working for. And Vintec was a product line that they had recently purchased from Australia. And so in the wine world, they were virtually unknown outside of Australia and maybe Singapore, because they did have a footprint in Singapore as well. So when Vintec acquired them, or when Electrolux acquired Vintec, they realized we know how to do washing machines, dryers, refrigerators, dishwashers. We know nothing about wine refrigeration and wine storage. So they were sort of looking nationwide, and it was interesting because they kind of discovered me from my wine show and my website, MikeTheWineGuy.com, and it was kind of a very interesting story on how we found each other. But we weren't necessarily looking for each other, but there's actually a really good story behind that. You want me to tell you this interesting story? This almost doesn't even make sense. Very interesting story. I get invited to a birthday party. Some friends knew me as Mike the Wine Guy because I used to do a lot of wine events and things like that. And it was a guy who I'd never met before. It was his father. It was his birthday. So I go to this place and they introduce me to the father. And so about 6 months later, maybe even 9 months later, I hadn't seen any of these people. And suddenly this guy calls me up and he says, my dad just got a application, or he's on all these job boards. His dad was a tech guy and he was on all these job boards because he was trying to find some gigs. And he got a letter from Electrolux that said, hey, would you like to apply for this job? It's the US regional wine manager. And he knew nothing about wine, but he remembered, I met a guy named Mike the Wine Guy. So he asked his son, do you think Mike the Wine Guy would like this? And he sent me the application. And I basically just sent them a cover letter and I go, if this is what you're looking for, and I send them my URL, next thing you know, we're all working together. So it was kind of an interesting set of circumstances that brought us together.
Wine storage is a surprisingly technical category. Compressor versus thermoelectric, single zone versus dual zone, humidity controls. How did you get the dealers comfortable enough to actually sell these kind of features rather than just read the spec sheet?
Well, fortunately, I didn't really have to do much of that. I was sort of my own department in a way. I worked with sales and I worked with marketing. Electrolux had their own really strong teams built within, and they had their own system of how they launched products. So as an example, Vintec in Australia probably had 20 or more actual items that they could sell. Skinny refrigerators, small refrigerators, different types, beverage things. When Electrolux acquired them, their first launch, what I was involved with, it was just 4 products. So 2 were under the counter. One of them was a dual zone, one was a single zone, and then 2 were what we call towers. So there's the big tower and the smaller tower. So they wanted to launch with that, and then they were going to sort of ramp as the years went by. So when I got involved, there was just 4 products that Electrolux was offering at the time, 2 towers and 2 under the counters. So with regards to all the technology that went around, all I had to do was remind people that wine likes 5 things, and we designed sort of a marketing program, what we call the 5 pillars. One is stable temperature. One is darkness or lack of bright sunlight. Another is low vibration. Another one is humidity. And then the other one is, I forget what the 4th one is, but whatever it was, I guess it's just steady temperature. But once we conveyed that to the sales staff at the retail stores, they were comfortable with feeling at least somewhat, not so much expert, but they could differentiate between sort of a single zone and a dual zone and let people know why things were the way they were. Oh, the other one was the compressor, and that's what sort of stifled the vibration. So our unit was probably one of the better ones on the market, or the better one on the market, because of lack of vibration from the compressors.
When you assessed the training gap across the dealer network, what was the single biggest knowledge weakness you kept running into, and how did you shape that program that you built?
Well, the biggest weakness was it sort of went completely across the whole industry. If you go to an appliance store, you're going to hear a guy he knows all the specs about a washer, a dryer, a refrigerator, the price, what's your price, all these things. But when it comes to wine, it's sort of almost like mirrored the response of a lot of people when you talk about wine. There's a certain intimidation factor for some reason about wine. And people that may enjoy wine and not know a lot about it, they feel uncomfortable talking about it for some reason because they feel like you know more than they do, etc. So when you go into an appliance store, or when you go to Electrolux, there I was at in their Charlotte, North Carolina headquarters, a lot of people drank wine, but very few people knew how to talk about wine. And they felt it was important, and I agreed that it's important to be able to communicate on people's level, but at the same time, back that up with the technology that's needed to know, the real true knowledge. And I think what helped me and Electrolux enter the market was that I can speak wine geek if I need to with sommeliers and chefs and winemakers. But when we're just with a regular crowd of people that are enjoying something out in the backyard, a barbecue, we don't have to go into that deep geek zone for them. And I think that was what made the communication really excellent with Electrolux between me and their dealers, because I was able to go in there and they didn't see me as an intimidating guy. I wasn't scaring anybody. And I was able to educate them in a very simple way, just like I did with a lot of my customers before and some of the wine retail businesses I've been involved with. But that's really, it's knowing your stuff, but not blowing people out of the water with too much knowledge at one time.
Walk us through the most significant training program you developed from scratch. What was the format? How was it delivered? How did you get the buy-in from dealers who were already stretched pretty thin?
Well, I think what differentiated us was, in my approach on this was sort of, I want to teach people the basics. And so what I would do is I'd go to typically we'd meet at a trade show. So I'd get to meet a lot of the retailers at the various trade shows that we did. And we were able to just pull each person aside or each store aside and sort of give their team an overview of what was going on. And then the other one was doing the wine events. And one of the things that I did was encourage the retailers. I would visit the retailers. And this is sort of a spin-off of what Electrolux did as the parent company. Electrolux had their VIP retailers out across the country. And we would do events and invite the VIPs, and we would show them we would do a wine pairing dinner as an example, and I would lead this, I would host the dinner, and different wine tasting experiences that we would do with these VIPs. And the incentive was for them, I would come to their store in their town, and they would invite their VIPs, which were architects, builders, developers, bankers, etc. And we would replicate the dinner that we had with them in Vegas or Houston or New York, and we do it in their town with their VIP customers, just to sort of get the buzz out. So that really differentiated us from a lot of the competition out there, because we were doing wine events, and we were sort of bringing people right into the whole reason to have a Vintec.
Tell us about the campaign that you're most proud of. What was the insight behind it? How did it run in the field? And what happened to the numbers?
Well, I'd have to say the most proudest one, or the most exciting one, was in between all this launch of this product, COVID comes along. And when you're trying to launch a product, an international product with so many moving parts, and it's literally a global effort. I mean, we had some manufacturing was going on in China, some manufacturing was going on in Denmark and Sweden, some manufacturing was going on in Georgia in the US. But when everything got shut down, it was like, what do we do now? And so I came up with this idea of doing a live event, but with video. And so everybody thought I meant Zoom. Everybody was used to Zoom. They were getting used to Zoom. And if you remember, Zoom is, I have nightmares about Zoom, but Zoom is one of those things where I can just see somebody's screen with all these little heads on this screen, and somebody's got a bright light behind them, somebody's cat's walking on the table, somebody else has a fan going like this, somebody else is yawning. I didn't want to do Zoom, and they wanted us to do a Zoom, and I said, we're not doing a Zoom. So what we did was I created a live show at a winery. And so Davis was one and Rudd was one. We did multiple shows there because it became so popular. And what Vintec would do and Electrolux would do is invite their VIPs. We would send them in advance 2 wines from these wineries. And then I would be at the winery with my crew, and we'd do a live 1-hour show on YouTube, and it wasn't Zoom. The interaction with the audience, which was desired, but it wasn't necessary or critical, but the interaction was just for people typing in comments, and I had a moderator over here that would show me some, the questions just came in, or so-and-so says hi from such and such a place, all that. But I just didn't want it to be a Zoom, and we had the winemaker and the winery owner there. But what made it the best was that it wasn't just 60 minutes of a live show. We'd gone out the week before and we shot what I call 3 sections. I like to think of wine starts in the vineyard, it ends up in the cellar, and then it ends up in some event like a party or a dinner or something like that. So we shot these 10-minute segments out in the vineyards with the winemaker or with the grape grower and these different venues, and we would interact that during this live show. So that it would allow us to change the set or to get a new guest in, but while we were showing. So we had some pre-recorded segments of this live, and it just lifted the production value tremendously. We got just so many accolades from that. It was really a bigger success than I'd ever thought it would be.
What were the in-store activities, either displays, demonstrations, events, that consistently moved product and kept your retail partners excited?
Well, it would be me showing up in person. So I would show up at, like one of the famous ones is over here at Friedman's, over here in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. We met at one of our trade shows. He was a great client of Electrolux anyway, and he took on this line. He's very committed to bringing Vintec into his store. And because I live in Napa, I was able to, just almost next door neighbor, go to some of his grand sales that he had, or not grand openings, but I guess he'd have these seasonal sales. And I'd just go and we'd bring some local wine from a Napa winery, and I'd be in the store not as a sales rep and not as a factory rep. Not that there's anything wrong with those guys, but again, if you work for one of the major manufacturers, you're good at what you do, but you don't necessarily know about wine. This was very wine-centric. And as a result, just by me being there and talking to people and pouring a little bit of wine and showing them the product, it was a win. I mean, on one Saturday at Friedman's, I think I was responsible, and I wasn't getting a commission, I wasn't literally selling them, but I had 12 people sign up for these towers that are $5,000 towers. So that was just one Saturday afternoon. So they were very happy to see me come to the store.
Wine is a passion category. Your dealers and their customers often know a lot about wine itself. How important was it for you personally to develop genuine wine knowledge, and did it change the way accounts perceived you?
Well, I mean, that's how they found me. I mean, they were looking for an expert, and my wine knowledge goes way, way back, way before I got involved with these guys. So it was sort of like an easy pick. I mean, they grabbed somebody that has, I think that I've been told anyway, I'm personable and knowledgeable and easy to get along with. And so it just seemed to be a comfortable fit. So I didn't really have to learn more to be part of this team. If anything, I was trying to spread the knowledge around to the team as much as I could, as well as the dealers.
Perhaps you could summarize, what are you most proud of? Not just the sales figures, but kind of the lasting infrastructure, the relationships, or even the culture that you helped build in that network.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I honestly had never been involved in the corporate world at that level. This is a multinational corporation that is known all around the world, Electrolux. They have such a tight infrastructure and I guess a corporate culture. I was definitely an outsider. I mean, I came in as just this outsider, but with welcome arms. They were very, very sweet to me in so many ways. And I think it was a two-way street, because I bring the fun to the office kind of thing. And there were so many people when we go to trade shows, they were just clamoring to be on the bus, because I was walking up and down the bus pouring wine, teaching people how to swirl and sniff and all that. And no matter where we were, Houston, New York, Dallas or Vegas, it was always a good, fun time. And I think if anything, and that's kind of what wine is. It's sort of like the social lubricant, as people will say. And, if you can't have fun with some fun people and a glass of wine, then you probably need to reevaluate things, I guess. I don't know. But wine is always fun. And the people that were there were great. And so were all the dealers. It was just great meeting them all.
And thank you, Mike, for sharing your wisdom and expertise on the business and pleasure of wine.
My pleasure. Cheers.